All right, you've done it. You've found us, the Football Frenemies podcast. Welcome back. As always, I, Brandon Jones, am joined by Cody Thomas, the resident Buckeye fan. I, a Michigan fan, will try to reason with him as we talk about college football today. The madness in his brain is sometimes difficult to handle, but I'm going to do my best. Today we're going to talk about the SEC, and we're also going to talk about some of the most overrated and underrated aspects of this upcoming college football season. So thanks for joining us, and before we get into it, Cody, how are you doing? What do you got for us today?
I mean, we're less than 2 months from college football season. I think this was the first time going through all the preparation that I legitimately started to feel the excitement. Because everything we had been doing before, we've been thinking it's 3 months, 4 months, 5 months out. But this time, we're less than 2 months. We're less than 8 weeks. It's super, super exciting. I cannot wait for college football to be back because it's just the best season. There is no other sports season like it. You know how I feel about the World Cup, but that's not a season. That's a tournament. Best season is college football, and we're finally less than 2 months away. So it is time for this to be around and for us to get rolling with it.
Yeah, I actually had the exact same kind of epiphany today as I saw on a countdown that we are less than 60 days away from Michigan's home opener. And even before that, I love the week 0 games. When you've got, last year was like Nebraska and Northwestern playing in Ireland. Some game that, usually you wouldn't care about. I was 110% invested in that game. And so I am so excited. It's getting here. We're in July now. So we're talking about media days coming up. And then August 1st, at least for Michigan, is when fall camp opens up. So it's very, very close. You mentioned the World Cup. Before we get into college football, I just got to know, how fired up were you about the USA-Mexico madness that went down with all the yellows and reds? What was your emotional reaction to that game?
Oh, it was all fantastic. Every second of it. Even though I very much think that Mexico are a bunch of punks and they goaded the USA into each of the red cards we got.
Yes, absolutely.
Weston McKennie legitimately was defending himself. Like, yeah, he did hit someone in the face, and in soccer, that's a red card. But he didn't punch him. He didn't slap him. He pushed him. He just pushed a dude in the face. And he had 3 or 4 guys backing him up into the Mexico bench. So, it was pure chaos. But his shirt being ripped, him walking off the field, and him kissing the crest is iconic. One of the iconic USA photos now. And then we went and beat Canada, who they have technically always been a rival, but only since this last World Cup cycle did they really come onto the scene as a straight up competitor. And they won World Cup qualifying, so they were calling themselves the Kings of CONCACAF. And so USA shut them down too, which was awesome to see. And now the United States plays them again in the Gold Cup on Sunday, which is super exciting. So we got another chance to really bury Canada as well. But it's been a really exciting time to be a fan of U.S. soccer and international soccer. I've loved it.
But we're not sending our best to that Gold Cup final, or are they calling up the big guns?
It's our B squad. The only mainstay we've got is Matt Turner, the goalkeeper. But a couple of the players on the team are guys who would be substitutes on the A team. So, for example, Jesus Ferreira, the striker, literally has back-to-back hat tricks. No one's ever done that before in U.S. history. So he is an A-level player playing in this tournament. So we got a few guys like that we can rest on while getting some good young guys some experience too. But I think they should still win. I think we should still win.
Well, vibes are good for soccer. We'll move on to college football. I'll let you maybe talk a little bit about what you sent me today. I had a blast filling it out, talking about overrated and underrated things.
Yeah, so in college football, we always love to debate these things, right? Who's got the best uniforms, best helmet, best fight song, best tradition or stadium? College football fans argue about that like crazy because there's so much history and things just behind it over time. And so instead of going best and worst, I sent it to you and I said, let's look at this of who do we think is the most overrated or the most underrated? So I sent you 7 different topics that we're going to go through one at a time. And we've each selected what we think is the most overrated and what we think is the most underrated. And so to explain to everyone else what we were looking for with overrated, we're not going what we think is the worst or what we think is bad. We're just going with something we think gets too much praise, something that is being valued as more than it actually is. And then the opposite for underrated, someone or something that is not getting the credit or the national spotlight that maybe it deserves when these specific things get talked about. So it's all just for fun to see what we're bringing for the table. I'm very interested to see if we have any of these that are the same. I'm going through it, and there's 14 total, and I'm sitting there wondering, are we even going to have one thing that is the same? There is kind of one program that I dog on a little bit, and it's kind of fun. I very much get a kick out of it. And so I'm curious. There is a chance you did too. So I am curious to see if we got in the same place. But
so before we get into it, my question is this going to be a recurring thing? Or because I got a little bit passionate. I have multiple answers for a few of these. So should I save them or just should I unload?
I think it's fine. We could always bring it back because these are conversations that you could go very much, because I kind of just focused on Power 5. I do have one non-Power 5 answer where maybe one time we could look at the Group of 5 or we could look at the MAC or all these different things. There's only one of them where I actually have 2 different things. Now, I can think of all the different names that I considered. At almost all of these, I considered more than one. There's only like 4 things where I was dead right away like, this is it. There's not a doubt in my mind. And yeah, I'd be willing to mention the other ones that I had going on as well.
Yeah, if you've got like a main one, but I got a little bit carried away, so maybe I had a lot of love and a lot of hatred for some of these.
Good.
Let's just get right into it with the most overrated uniform. Now, just for a heads up, I did include the helmet design in the uniform for this. I don't know if you did it as well. But because we didn't talk about helmets, I figured that's kind of part of the uniform. So go ahead and start us off. What's your most overrated uniform?
My most overrated uniform is LSU.
Oh, that is a hot take.
And so,
I like LSU.
But for me, the reason why I think it's so overrated, the only thing that's cool about them is they just always wear white. It's not that the uniform itself is great. They just always wear white. And when they only ever wear purple at home for non-conference games. And when they do, it looks so out of place. It just doesn't look right. And on top of that, one time a year, they will wear their purple jersey with the white helmet and the white pants. I think that does not look good at all. But LSU, yes, it is a little bit of a historical jersey, but I don't think it deserves. I think it's fine. I think it's just fine. The only thing that is really cool about it is like they're the only team that wears white everywhere they go. That's why I think it's overrated. Because it doesn't have the same classic sleek design like a Penn State or an Alabama or Texas. It doesn't, to me, it doesn't carry that. It's definitely not exactly a modern one, but I do not get the same feelings of LSU's uniforms as Bama, Penn State, and Texas. And so that's why they're the most overrated for me, is just because they wear white everywhere. That's all that's special about it.
See, when I typed in LSU uniform, one of the first pictures that comes up is Joe Burrow, and he's got the white, but the number is purple, and then the shoulder stripes are the yellow and the purple, which then the pants are the yellow, the helmet is yellow. So I feel like it really goes together well. I like LSU. I did some research to figure out what if things were truly under or overrated. So LSU does come in pretty high. I would definitely knock them down. I think they were in the top 5 of almost every list I looked at, which is high. But I'm high. Yes, I would knock them down, but I still think they're probably top 15. So I'm unwilling to maybe join you there. I'm gonna have maybe a hot take because the second team that I had for overrated was Penn State, because all you have is a solid blue jersey, solid white pants, a solid white helmet with a solid blue stripe down the middle. There is nothing. If that team if those jerseys, you put them on any high school team, you'd be like, yeah, those are high school jerseys because there's nothing going on. It's a clean look, absolutely. But they are not in the top 3, which they're listed almost everywhere, a top 3, top 5 jersey. Not even close. Penn State gets so much praise for their helmet. Why? It's a white helmet. It doesn't even have a lion on it. If they had a Nittany lion, I would be all about it. But it is horribly overrated. So when you said that, I almost was like, are you kidding? What is happening? Am I mad? Because I think it is so mediocre. It's solid. It's great. But it is not iconic. It is just there.
Since you defended LSU, I'll step in and defend Penn State. I think what's so great about it is nothing about it has changed. Even the number font appears to be the same. I looked at a bunch of LSU jerseys, and you can look at where fonts and things has changed. I think that's what it is. If Penn State tried to somehow update it while keeping their nothingness on their uniforms, I would agree with you. But I think the fact that it's never changed is part of what the allure of the Penn State uniforms. Same thing with Alabama. Only thing different between Alabama and Penn State, Alabama puts numbers on the helmet. And Penn State even does that once a year as well. They'll put the numbers on the helmet. But for me, that's why I'll defend Penn State. I would not put Penn State in my top 5, but I'd put them in top 10.
Alabama's right there with Penn State. There's just nothing there that excites me. Put an elephant on your helmet. Give me something to look at other than just red and white. Too boring. I'm about to blow your mind here.
Are Texas whites the number 1 uniform in college football? Because I think so.
No. Texas is a great uniform.
The all-white.
I actually prefer their burnt orange, but the helmet with the longhorn is awesome. But apparently, if it was just a white helmet with a orange stripe, that'd be way better.
Special.
Oh, that's ridiculous. With the logo of the longhorn, it makes it fantastic. So my actual first answer is going to make you so upset.
For underrated or overrated?
For over, because Penn State was actually the second answer. Okay. The most overrated jerseys. So, on every list that I found today, this was the number 1 best jersey in college football. I don't see it. Perhaps hatred has clouded my judgment. Do you know what the number 1 jersey in college football is according to 247 Sports and a bunch of other outlets?
I assume you are leading me down a specific path right now.
Guess who it is? Who has the most overrated jerseys in college football?
I'm going to assume it's Ohio State.
Ohio State? How? It's the same thing. They got the white helmet or black now, and you got the stripe down the middle, red stripe, and then you put stickers on. I like the stickers.
We're iconic. Other programs have tried to do it. The stickers is us. We are the stickers. Put those marijuana leaves right on them.
Yeah, but I mean the jerseys they just don't do much for me. Now I will say
the color
when you
scheme,
go into
man,
the playoffs,
scarlet and gray. The color scheme is just the scarlet and gray works so well.
There's better color schemes out there. What I'm trying to say is the design is just blah to me. Kind of like Penn State. There's a little bit more going on, but to be the number 1 is a reach and a half. And when you get into the playoffs, if you look up the Ohio State playoff uniforms, they are very much improved over the regular season threads.
They go back to the ones with the gray stripes because in 2006, the Troy Smith Heisman Trophy year, they went to the scarlet jerseys that it's just white and black. They got rid of all the gray on it. So anytime we've played in the playoff, we always go back to the gray stripes on the jerseys.
And it makes a world of difference. You add in the patch for whatever bowl you're in, and it's a very good-looking jersey. The other 12 weeks of the year, completely mediocre, in my opinion. I don't know how they're getting number 1 votes for best jersey.
The best, man.
It's just ridiculous to me. So Penn State, Alabama, Ohio State, you guys are getting points for your jerseys because you have good programs, not because your jerseys are actually cool. There are actually great jerseys out there that are so underrated that I'm excited to talk about. I'll let you go first. We'll see if we have any matches.
I only listed 1 here for underrated, and actually it came to me pretty quickly. And I think it became very quickly to me because I do remember one of their alternate jerseys which is my favorite uniform of all time. But even just their classic uniform, which really hasn't changed much at all over the year, I think Virginia Tech has got some really nice uniforms. I love the color scheme. I love the designs. I love the VT on the helmet. But man, when they played Boise State in 2009 or 2010, they had those all black jerseys with that like purplish maroon faded down into that glowing orange. That's like the best uniform I've ever seen in football, were those Virginia Tech uniforms. But even the regular ones, I think Virginia Tech never gives any love because they still have a more classic look to their uniforms. There's some things that have been updated, but they still are pretty close to their classic look. I think Virginia Tech has got some kicking uniforms.
100% agree. If you take Virginia Tech's uniforms, their stadium atmosphere, some of their recent history, if you add that all together, you're thinking this is a real college football program, and they're terrible. It's like they should be better just based on how cool they look, how awesome the atmosphere is for a night game. Like, all these things should be helping them. Right now they're just bad, and I still appreciate all of those aspects. So great call out with Virginia Tech. So one of the reasons actually I had to research these is because I was afraid that the jersey I want to call out isn't underrated because maybe it's already the best jersey in college football. Everywhere I looked, it was like top 20, top 15, but not top 10.
Okay.
I think it has an argument for being the best jersey in college football. That's Florida State. When you have the garnet and gold with the spears on the helmet and like the shoulder, there's a lot going on with, I think there's like diamonds that are like, it's like that maroon, the garnet color. I think those are possibly the greatest jerseys in all of college football. One of the reasons, just like Virginia Tech, if you look that cool, you had better be a good team. And Florida State hasn't been, but they're on the rise. Maybe this year they're going to play as good as their jerseys look. Probably my favorite jersey in college football. I had a couple honorable mentions. I just got to throw them out there. UCLA.
I considered UCLA. That's a good shout. I very much considered UCLA.
One of my favorites of all time, in the running with top, I think, with Florida State. And then also got to throw out there Tulane, a little bit of a outside the Power 5 love. With if you look up Tulane, it's like that tealish, not teal, but like a lighter bluish green.
Yeah, it's like two different shades too. They're both part of it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And one more, I got to find it. Ole Miss. When Ole Miss has got that red,
powder
white, and blue action. And the powder blues especially
the powder blues.
Just gorgeous.
Powder blues
so a lot of love for those jerseys. That's why I get so upset when I hear that Penn State has great jerseys. Look at the creativity. I mean, these guys have got spears on their helmets and just gorgeous jerseys. And then you've got, like, we're living in a world with only two colors with Penn State or Alabama or sometimes Ohio State.
Ohio State. The best. Anything with maroon, I almost will say it's great. The soccer program I coach, our main color is maroon. And also our mascot is the Indians. So this year we did a whole rebranding of the way we wrote out like Indian soccer and that. And we pretty much ripped off Florida State this year. We've got the spear. We've got the font. We're going to get new uniforms next year. And the number scheme is going to be the exact same as the Florida State jerseys as well.
Give it a year, you'll be the Guardians.
I already have a pitch written down. If they would have made us change from the Indians, I think it would have happened by now. But I already have a pitch down that if they do make us change our mascot, I am pitching hard for the Mighty Ducks.
Ooh, I love that.
There is no other high school team in the state of Ohio with the mascot, the Ducks.
Another team that should be better than they are is the Mighty Ducks in NHL. Let's move on to stadium. Who do you have for overrated? I've got a really, I think, hot take here that I'm almost afraid to put out there.
You go first then.
The Rose Bowl.
Really?
It's overrated. When you're playing in the Rose Bowl for the Rose Bowl, it's one of the greatest venues in all of sports. You got the sunset over the mountains, and it's gorgeous, and the place is obviously full. I think back to, I think it was 2013 or so. I just remember watching this game between Michigan State and Stanford. obviously I'm a Michigan fan. I don't care for Michigan State. That game was magical. And it was obviously a close game that came down to like the last play, but the atmosphere, it was perfect college football. However, you can't be a great stadium only one game out of the entire year. And UCLA plays in this beautiful stadium that they fill up to maybe 30% of its capacity every other game. And then they can't fill it up so badly, they have to tarp off sections that have the UCLA logo on it.
Yeah.
So the entire end zone is just a logo of UCLA. There's no fans. You're kicking the extra point, you're kicking the field goals. No one there. You score a touchdown, you celebrate. No one in the shot. For however many 7-8 weeks of home games, it is one of the saddest venues in all of college football. And then on January 1st, it's one of the greatest. Mm-hmm. So I do give it the props for January 1st. All the other games there honestly suck. So that's why it's overrated.
So for you, it's more of UCLA's effect on the stadium than the stadium itself.
The stadium is cool, but like if Michigan didn't fill up the Big House every Saturday, the Big House would have a lot less of its luster. It would not be as some people say, a mecca of college football, because it would lose its charm. So yeah, I think that the Rose Bowl, it's a little overrated.
So not to sound petty, Michigan was on my list, but it is not the one that I went with. But like you said, if they don't fill up, it's just a giant bowl that's 3/4 into the ground. It's just a bowl. Put some Cap'n Crunch in there, give me a big spoon, and you could do about the same thing. So USC was high on my list too. I think the Coliseum is nothing special. But to be honest, when I did come across one, to me it was very clear what the number one most overrated stadium, and it's undoubtedly Notre Dame Stadium. I think it is easily the most overrated stadium. The two coolest
why do you
things,
say that?
The two coolest things aren't even a part of the stadium. It's the Gold Dome and Touchdown Jesus. They're part of the buildings that are on campus. They happen to build the stadium right next to those. So if the stadium wasn't even on that part of the campus, there would be absolutely nothing cool about Notre Dame Stadium. It's just a smaller version of Michigan Stadium. That's all it is. That's
basically why I think it's a great stadium. It's just like the Big House.
Yeah, but the whole point of the Big House...
You're still fitting 80,000 people.
They are, but the whole point of the Big House is you're getting like almost 120, though. That's the whole reason why the Big House works. That model doesn't work if it's not the largest stadium in the country, or even almost the world at that point. That's why Notre Dame's is so overrated. Oh, Touchdown Jesus, Golden Dome. Those are part of the cathedrals, not the stadium. No, it's not scary to play at Notre Dame Stadium. Like, teams go and win on the road all the time at Notre Dame. Like, it is easily the most overrated. It's one of those stadiums that, it's been around a while. That's it.
Now, were you able to go on that trip in our college days where we got to tour the Notre Dame Stadium?
Yep.
Okay. So you didn't feel at all while you were there maybe the aura of history as we went on the field and saw, the grass field. Everyone's going to turf now. It's still grass. The end zones with only those, white hash marks that go kind of diagonal or across it. It's different.
No, I didn't get the aura. I mean...
You didn't slap the Play Like a Champion Today sign and think, this is pretty cool?
No, I did not. To me, there was nothing special about it. I've been in the Big House multiple times. I've been to the Horseshoe dozens of times. And even when I was at the Big Show, I do remember getting vibes of like, this is cool. This feels special. I got nothing special about being in Notre Dame. It felt like a giant high school stadium that just happened to go all the way around. Yeah, Notre Dame, I think it's easily the most overrated. It's historic. It's not special. It's historic.
Historic. I think historic it means a lot to me.
I'm not going to take away I'm not going to take away the history of it, but there's nothing special about it. It's just historic.
Well, maybe we'll get a little more context when we talk about some of the underrated stadiums to think so we can get your perspective on what makes a stadium great or what is special. But yeah, you said smaller version of the Big House as a negative, and I view that's exactly the vibe I got when I was there. This is like the Big House, but just a little bit smaller, and I loved it. I thought it was fantastic, and I actually am only 45 minutes away. I would like to go to more games there. So, let's see. I lost my list because my phone went to sleep here. So that was your overrated, which is Notre Dame. That's a hot take. I think that might be hotter than my Rose Bowl. There's a lot of Irish that might come tracking.
Like I said, remember, it's not that Notre Dame Stadium is bad. It just gets so much more praise than I think it deserves.
I guess I'm a little bit maybe biased because I've over talked about this, but I was able to watch a game in the press box, and it was the USC game, so I was able to see the sunsets while they're playing. You can see touchdown Jesus from there, and obviously the energy for a night game is way different than a noon game against a rival. So I probably have a different perspective. You had mentioned the Big House. It's kind of a similar situation where if you attend a Big House game, like I remember we attended the game against SMU a few years back when Sonny Dykes actually was a coach for SMU, and it was maybe one of the more boring games I've ever attended because the game wasn't close, and it just was – there wasn't a lot of excitement. But if you attend a night game or if you attend a Michigan State or Ohio State game, I truly do believe it becomes one of the best stadiums in the country. So that one is very dependent, I think, on opponent, where some of these better ones we're going to talk about might be hopping no matter who shows up. So I got kind of out of left field. My most underrated stadium is Husky Stadium for Washington. Mm-hmm. So when you part of the stadium atmosphere, you might not be taking this into account. Tailgating is one of the greatest things that you can do at a stadium. And you know what they do at Husky Stadium?
What's that?
They tailgate on their boats because they have the like river or lake or whatever that goes right up to the stadium. And so they have literally just huge boats that they all tie together and they all tailgate together on their boats. That's got to be one of the coolest things. But not only that, but then you have the mountains in the background over the stadium. So it's just gorgeous. And I think one of the more underrated stadiums in all of college football. One of those that I'd love to get out to, but unfortunately, I don't own a boat, so I'd have to just find someone and suck up to them. Can I please tailgate on your boat? That sounds like the greatest day of my life.
That would be pretty cool. I think that's a good one for sure. And the reason why I'm picking mine is very similar. You definitely picked it on cool, unique atmosphere that you don't really get many other places, and that's why I picked BYU.
Yep.
BYU's got a great stadium. It actually, when they fill it up, it is actually one of the loudest stadiums in the country. They said when it's full, it makes the top 10 for the way it's built. But you've got the mountains behind. I can't remember what side it is, but they say I was reading things, they said when you play a game that when dusk happens and the sun is setting right behind the mountains that everyone can see behind one end of the stadium, like that just sounds amazing. Like to be there for a really quality football game, historic program, historic stadium, but it's got a really unique setup and the way they built it is really, really cool because it's in like 4 different sections. There's kind of like a little bit of gaps at the corner of each end zone, but they're kind of like, it's like built up. It's not built out, it's built up, like right on a mountainside. And so I think BYU has got a really, really great setting. And then I was a little surprised when they said like BYU has the capability to be one of the loudest stadiums in the country as well.
Yeah, a lot of those out west schools seems like they get louder just based on, I think, maybe the way they're built.
They're all built in valleys. They're surrounded by mountains. Yeah. They're not in the Midwest where it's flat everywhere.
Built into the ground.
Literally.
That BYU Utah, the Holy War. I can only imagine a game, there with the sunset and the mountains, and obviously just the pure hatred. I'd love to catch a game there.
not to jump the gun, but that was my number 2 underrated rivalry that we'll get to soon. I think we're 2 topics away from that, but since you mentioned it, it was my like first honorable mention for underrated rivalry. I think the Holy War is awesome. It's got a great name too. Great name.
I am a huge fan of rivalry names. So like I didn't know this, but apparently TCU versus Baylor, both religious schools, it's called the Revivalry.
Oh,
how awesome is that?
That's pretty neat.
I'm more invested in it just because of a good name. We'll move on, though, to most overrated tradition. So I'm kind of a Grinch. I love traditions. I appreciate them. However, I truly believe that the majority of traditions are overrated. I'm just throwing that out there. I think there's only a handful of traditions that are actually good. It's not on my list. But I just got to throw this in your face because you're a Buckeye. Dotting the I, it's not that cool.
No other program has anything like it.
I want you to appreciate it. I'm glad you enjoy it. You know, it's like people who enjoy The Last Jedi or The Rise of Skywalker. Like, good for you that you can enjoy that. But it is so mediocre. The majority of traditions are mediocre. I'll say it to myself. Michigan, when they touch the banner, I enjoy it. It's not like that crazy special. It's literally just hitting a banner.
I actually have it pretty high on
it's
my
good.
list, like as a good tradition. Like I think it's actually a really
so that's what my perspective is.
It's a really good tradition.
The average tradition sucks. Almost all of them are just not that cool. But traditions in general are fun, and I'm glad people enjoy them. I enjoy a tradition where they run out and touch a banner that is honestly, I would rather the tradition be that every home game gets a flyover, and every flyover pilot is a U of M grad. I think that'd be way cooler. I'm gonna get into it. The dumbest tradition that gets so much hype is when Clemson.
We have the same.
Rubs their little rock.
First same
and
one!
then they run down a hill.
Yes, I looked up the story on this. That is and honestly, that was one of the ones I came to decisively. Before I even looked up anything, I said, Clemson, the stupid rock. That is easily. Dude, did you even look up the history of the rock?
All I know is it's Howard's Rock.
Yeah.
And I read a little bit and I said, I don't care enough to finish this.
Dude, the rock was a doorstop.
Overrated.
He wanted the rock out of his office because it was a doorstop. So they put it on a pedestal and they pet it when they run down that hill. That I don't know how one person doesn't at least tear their ACL every single time they run and jump going down that hill.
It stresses me out. And everyone thinks it's the coolest thing.
No.
It is not.
It's not.
It is honestly terrible.
We are
now,
in 100% agreement.
I honestly think most are pretty bad traditions, but I do have a couple that I just want to throw out there as these are excellent.
Okay.
And maybe it's because I'm a sick person and they involve a little bit of risk, because I love the Ralphie run when Colorado's guys run out with a literal bison and he sprints on the field. And I don't know, is Ralphie in a bad mood? He could kill them, but they do it all the time. And he sprints, and when Ralphie runs, something about a buffalo running, it looks like they're punishing the ground. Like, they just run angry. I love that one. I also really like the Sooner Schooner.
That was my number 2.
Those things go out there, and they take the turn too hard. I've seen that thing flip over, and it is electric. You don't know. Are they going to make it? I love the Sooner Schooner. I think one more that is not necessarily that great, but still one I appreciate is Enter Sandman from Virginia Tech.
That's
another shout out to Virginia Tech.
But it's not that old.
No, it's not. It's a recent tradition, but they've started it, and they stick with it. I think it's electric. What else do you got? I kind of threw a bunch out there, but
so Sooner Schooner and Enter Sandman were my 2 and 3 for underrated.
Okay.
I love the Sooner Schooner, and Enter Sandman would be really cool if Virginia Tech was actually good.
Yep.
But they're not. it took me a little while to find the one that I wanted to think was like overrated or underrated, doesn't get the attention it deserves. And this one actually is around a lot longer than I thought. It is really cool when Nebraska releases the balloons when they score their first touchdown of the game. I think that one is really, really cool. It's unique. No one else does anything like it. It's something that involves everybody in the stadium. It's not just something on the field. It involves all the fans, which I think that's really, really cool. One of the reasons why I think one of my favorite traditions at Ohio State is Carmen, Ohio, our alma mater song, because it involves everyone. You put your arms around each other, you sway back and forth, you sing it. It involves everybody in the stadium. I think that's what's so cool about the Nebraska balloon release, because it involves everyone. I do have to give the caveat that they paused it last year. I didn't know this until now, but they paused it last year because the president of the school said there is a helium shortage thanks to the Russia-Ukraine war.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Putin.
I know, right? Putin out here ruining everything. But they said it was a temporary thing. They have not said it's done forever. So since it's not been said to be done forever yet, I listed that as I think it's really cool because I love the way it involves everybody.
That's a good point. If you're involving everybody, that is a pretty neat thing to do. Couple more shout-outs I got to say. Florida State, Chief Osceola, when he rides out on the horse with the spear that he throws into the ground. I love everything like that.
Good one.
Let's move on then to most overrated rivalry. I've got a really, once again, I am just going to get so much hate. I'm just going to say it. I'm just going to get it out of the way. Most overrated rivalry is Army-Navy. I'm sorry if I am not if I'm not American enough. I know we just celebrated July 4th. Here's the thing. Army-Navy is really only very special because they're playing on a week where no one else is playing. And everyone else is like, I just need college football, so I'll watch this game. The games are not that good. The teams are not that good. I have seen lists that when you ask what are the best college football rivalries, Army-Navy is above the game. Between Michigan and Ohio State. It's above the Iron Bowl. I don't see it. I think that it's cool. It's patriotic. Like, yeah, I enjoy it. But it is not the best rivalry in college football. It's not even close. I think that Michigan State is a better rivalry than Army-Navy. And I realize that makes me a commie and a horrible American, but that's just my opinion. I'm sticking to it because I'm American and I can do that.
I'm starting to think you're the one that left the cocaine at the White House the other day, based on that take right there.
Well, sounds like I'm going to get away with it, so it's all good.
That I think is the boldest take so far. But I think I've got a pretty bold one here too. And I chuckled earlier because you actually alluded to this in a good way, and I'm going to allude to it in not a good way because I think it's overrated. I don't ever get any allure with USC Notre Dame.
Ooh.
I think that is only a rivalry because at one point back in the 30s and 40s, they were the only programs willing to play across the country. And so they're a rivalry because they would play each other across the country. Can you remember a time in your life or even think historically of a great USC Notre Dame game that just sticks in your mind? Like, think about Bama Auburn 2013. That's just in your mind. You remember that. I could not tell you one great USC Notre Dame game, especially one where it had implications about a national championship. Yeah. Like, where both teams were there competing for a chance to try and get to. I think it's a rivalry that's going to die with USC going to the Big Ten, and I don't think it will be missed by anybody except Notre Dame fans.
They have had close games, but like you said, they haven't had the nationally impactful games because both teams have had periods of being down. Like when Notre Dame was up, USC was down. USC's on the rise, and I think Notre Dame might be on the way down. So I still think it's a great rivalry. I mean, I think history matters. Like Michigan, Ohio State, just because, like, go back 2 years before Michigan had kind of gotten back into the rivalry. Ohio State had been dominant, and I still think the rivalry was amazing. even though Michigan hadn't really made it a game.
Yeah.
And so I think even if you don't have those nationally impactful games, I think a rivalry can still be very important. And I think a lot of people do watch it and do care about it. But, I mean, where would you place it? Like top 10?
No.
Or not even in top 10?
No.
Oh, that's tough.
Like, it's probably it's maybe still top 15, which is fine.
Because
my point is it's not a bad rivalry. My point is it's an overrated rivalry. Because, think about it. Michigan-Ohio State is remembered for specific coaches involved. Players, plays, results. USC-Notre Dame, I legitimately cannot think of one impactful play, moment, or coach, or anything from it besides maybe the Bush push. Is that the only one? The Bush push?
I mean, I'm sure that there's some, but you do have to go back a ways when both teams were in their heyday, and like you had mentioned, back in the earlier 1900s, you have Notre Dame as one of the more nationally relevant programs, and in the Midwest, and then you have the nationally relevant USC in the West, and so that's unheard of that two national powers across the country would play each other annually. So I do think it's very pretty neat.
But that's all there is to it, though. Like, Michigan-Ohio State was born because of what happened on the field and what coaches said and what players did. That's what bore it. USC-Notre Dame is just two names that were the ones, really the first
Huge
ones
names
to do the cross-country play consistently. That's why it's overrated. It's not a bad rivalry. That's why it's just an overrated rivalry.
All right. I'll understand that. For underrated, I'm not even sure I really believe this, but I just like it. The Bedlam rivalry with Oklahoma State. This is a completely one-sided rivalry. Oklahoma has dominated Oklahoma State, and Oklahoma State wins once every 10 to 20 years, basically. And yet, it is the classic little brother rivalry that tugs on my heartstrings. It reminds me of Michigan State, where there is so much hatred, and Oklahoma is going to the SEC and has no future plans of playing Oklahoma State, and you can tell it just eats at Oklahoma State, and they want to kill Oklahoma, and Oklahoma pretends to not really care, but they do deep down.
Yeah, a little bit.
I am very much intrigued with the Bedlam series this year, and then I will be waiting very anxiously to see if they get that back on the schedule. In a similar way, like Michigan-Notre Dame. We don't play Notre Dame anymore. Fantastic rivalry.
It is.
A lot of hatred there. And I think Oklahoma State is one of those that I would like to see it played every year, even if Oklahoma's in the SEC. Underrated.
See, that's interesting for me to hear because my dad is a diehard Oklahoma Sooners fan. He has been his whole life. My dad grew up in Kansas, so big Kansas Jayhawks basketball fan. But all I heard about growing up was even if you lived in Kansas, you chose Oklahoma or you chose Nebraska. So for me, when I think of Oklahoma's rival, even though they haven't played consistently since 2011, they've only played twice. When I think Oklahoma, I think of Nebraska. That's the rival. Then the second one I think of is Texas. So for me, Oklahoma State is the third one. So I think that's normal because by the time you were in college, Oklahoma, Nebraska weren't in the same conference. But all I heard from my dad was how he would tell me, he's like, you think Ohio State, Michigan is great. You should have seen Oklahoma, Nebraska back in the days. That's all my dad would talk about all the times, Oklahoma, Nebraska. And so that's why it's a hard thing for me to buy into Oklahoma State because for me, that's the number 3 rivalry for the Sooners.
See, I'm not saying it's a top rivalry. I'm just saying it's underrated.
Okay.
Because I think the hatred there is higher than the amount of attention it receives.
Yeah, Oklahoma State mirrors Michigan State in a lot of ways in that spot right there. That is, like I said, I'm not gonna argue it. Like I said, it's not what I would have thought of, but I'm not. I think it's fine. I think it's a good answer. I'm gonna give you a guess to see if you can figure this out. Mine that I picked is the oldest Power 5 rivalry. Do you know who it is?
Man.
It is in the Big Ten.
Okay, if it's in the Big Ten, it's got to involve Minnesota, right? Okay. Minnesota. Oh, man. Is it Minnesota, Wisconsin?
Yep.
Okay. That's a great rivalry.
It is a great rivalry. It's got a great trophy. Paul Bunyan's axe, great trophy. It's the most played, oldest rivalry of all Power 5. And what makes it so unique is over half the time they often play in the snow or a snowstorm. You get all these rivalries that, you see them, it looks warm outside. Even though Michigan, Ohio State can be cold, last year it was in like the 50s when they played in Columbus.
It's a beautiful day for football.
But when you go up and you play in Minnesota, in Minneapolis, like it can be freezing. It can be snowing. It can be brutal. And I think it's a great rivalry, great tradition. I think you could call them both historic programs. Not great programs, but they're both historic programs.
Oh, yeah.
And they play for an awesome trophy. Awesome trophy. And so I think Wisconsin-Minnesota is one that deserves more. I think it was 2019 when PJ Fleck was having that big year, and they went into the game like 10-1, and I think Wisconsin was 9-2, and College Game Day was there. I was like, I literally thought there, even though Michigan, Ohio State were playing that day, I was like, how cool is it that Wisconsin, Minnesota finally has College Game Day there? I was glued to that game. I remember watching the game because Minnesota got upset at home. Wisconsin beat them on the road when Minnesota was supposed to be 11-1. They were supposed to be preparing to go to the Big Ten championship, and the whole thought was, if they beat Ohio State somehow, if they beat Justin Fields' Ohio State, Minnesota might be in the college football playoff. Can you believe that was actually reality at one point? We were talking Minnesota was legitimately less than 2 weeks away from being in a playoff. But yeah,
Minnesota team that had legitimate NFL talent.
Yeah, they did.
Amazing they were able to have that much talent.
The thing that PJ Fleck has done really well since he's been there is the offensive line. Every game when you look at them, you're like, that's a good offensive line. They've never really been able to put it fully together. 2019 was their best chance, and they haven't fully capitalized off the momentum. I think PJ Fleck does a great job of rallying the underdog, but now all of a sudden when they weren't the underdog in that Wisconsin game, they folded. They didn't know how to be the favorite. They didn't know how to be the big dog, and so PJ Fleck's got to figure that aspect out. But if he does, Minnesota's still got... If you got a good offensive and defensive line, you can pick up skill positions in the transfer portal. So...
Can you do that at Minnesota? We'll see. I'm down on Minnesota this year. We'll probably talk about that in our next pod with the Big Ten.
I am too.
Our next category is mascot. I'm going to I kind of broke the rules on this one.
Okay.
So I just want to get it all out there. I'm going to be a Grinch again a little bit because overrated mascot is literally every mascot that is a human person. So like Notre Dame's fighting Irish guy.
See, that's not overrated. That's just the worst.
It is. Or like the West Virginia Mountaineer guy, or like any person that's a person in a costume, like you can tell it's a person. And then the best is any animal. So if you have the Ralphie, the bison, if you have Uga, the bulldog for Georgia, or I can't remember the name of the Tennessee dog, or the husky, when they have a live animal, it makes me so happy. And when they sometimes interact with each other, I'm just beaming at the television. When I think it was Bevo, the longhorn, tried to attack Uga, the bulldog. I mean, I felt bad a little bit for Uga, but that's iconic in my mind. He tried to attack the dog. Like, this is real life battle. So yeah, any person, terrible. Any actual animal, sign me up. I'll just sit there and watch the mascots all day.
I am glad
I want a live Wolverine to run around the stadium and attack people.
Well, that's a hazard. But I am glad that you're picking something with like an actual mascot present. Like I said, for me, like Michigan was excluded from this opportunity. You don't have a mascot in the stadium.
Yep.
I do want to go first because I want to break your heart.
Do it.
My most overrated mascot is Uga.
Ooh, he's a I don't like
it's
bulldogs.
Just a regular. It's just a dog. It's just a regular dog. It's just a regular dog. Like you said, Bevo is amazing. The Bison is amazing. Even though it's not the actual one, the Eagle from Auburn, that's amazing. Uga's
amazing.
just a dog. He's just a dog, and he's an ugly dog.
Would you say that he's just a dog to the Tennessee, he's like a bloodhound? Or something like that? He might be a bloodhound,
but the Georgia one is more famous than the Tennessee dog.
Would you say it to the Husky?
At Washington?
I think it's either Washington or I think Northern Illinois maybe has a Husky.
Do they bring in a dog?
Yeah.
Okay, well then they're all grouped in. It's just a regular dog. You know?
Oh, you're breaking my heart.
If they brought in a wolf, greatest mascot ever. Bring a wolf. But it's just a dog.
Right.
Uga literally can't move. If he takes 5 steps, he might have a heart attack. Like, I'm legitimately worried for his well-being at every single game he's at. He just sits in a cage. He just sits in that cage panning.
When Bevo tried to attack Uga, was that a moment that you appreciated or no?
I wanted Bevo to finish the job.
All right. If you enjoyed it, you have to give Uga credit. He was a character in this story. I don't care if he's just a dog. He's a good boy, and he deserves a lot of love. He's better than the rest of that Georgia. So I don't like Georgia's jerseys. I like their mascot.
I think it's not special.
Do you have any other things on mascots? I got one more.
Not for overrated.
Hot take.
Not for overrated. It's just a dog. It's just a regular dog. It doesn't deserve the love that it gets.
What do you got for under then?
See, for underrated, I have also put my favorite mascot of all time. So you might potentially remember this from college. I'm not sure, but
Is it the dragon?
No, it's not the dragon. But
is it the West Kentucky little?
Yes, it is the hill. It is the Hilltopper. The dude, like if you just get a mascot that just like isn't a real thing at all, but it just encapsulates you.
Will never convince me.
There is nothing.
That's not a McDonald's character,
dude. I think the McDonald's characters were born from the Hilltopper. Like, there is nothing better than when that Hilltopper just shakes its stomach like the Philadelphia Philly. And there's also been times, there's videos too of the Hilltopper just like going around and there's like a cheerleader person and it just engulfs it and that person disappears. Like, man, I would, like, don't get me wrong. Like I very much think that Brutus the Buckeye is a top 3 mascot of all time. But if you offered me a trade of Brutus for the Hilltopper, I'm taking that deal. Give me the Hilltopper, man. I am in love with that mascot. It is the best.
How do you feel about the Demon Deacon?
I'm trying to even remember what it is. I don't know I know I've seen it, but I actually have to pull it up. Are you going that it's overrated or underrated with it?
So a lot of people think that the Demon Deacon or Purdue's what's the Purdue mascot's name?
The Boilermaker.
He's got a name though, right? Pete or something? I don't know.
I don't.
But
care.
the Boilermaker, a lot of people find them because they're human, but they're like a little off.
But it's got a head. It's not a person's head. It is a head.
Yeah. So a lot of people find those mascots a little bit disturbing.
Dude, I'm looking at it right now.
I honestly like them.
The Demon Deacon looks like a claymation from like an old Christmas movie. That's what he looks like. He looks like the Snow Miser from The Year Without a Santa Claus.
It's Purdue Pete. That's his name. Purdue Pete.
Okay.
I love Purdue Pete, just because he is a little bit weird. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm not talking about. Yes, the guy that's Demon Deacon is a little weird. It's the Providence Friar, which is more college basketball, but he is like creepy. I love it. Give me the scary mascot all day.
For your underrated?
Yeah. Oh, underrated any animal that's like a live action.
Okay.
But also just honorable mention, I love the creepy mascots. I want to be a little bit scared.
Did you say you're overrated?
Yeah, every human mascot.
That's right. Okay.
The Fighting Irish or the Mountaineer, or there's others that I just don't even want to think about.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Okay, that's a good one. We got 2 left, and this is the first time it's actually about the teams now. First we're doing is quarterback, and this is specific for returning for or going into the 2023 season. At least I did. You might have done all time. I did it just for
Oh yeah.
I did it for going into this season.
Yep.
Okay.
That's what I did as well.
Okay.
You want to go ahead and go first?
Sure. I'm just going to keep crapping on Notre Dame. I think Sam Hartman is the most overrated quarterback.
All-time ACC touchdown leader.
I do not think he is a bad quarterback. I felt iffy on him at first. He wasn't the one that I had at first. But I started looking a little bit more of his stats, and first of all, he's been around for forever. If he was actually good, the dude would be in the NFL. He has played 5 college football seasons, about to go into his 6th. Like, come on. Like, get to the NFL already. 4 of the 5 years, his completion percentage under 60%. 4 of the 5. To be fair, his last one, he finally got it up. But each of the last 2 years, he's had double-digit interceptions as well.
So what would it take for Notre Dame's season for you to recant this? What would he have to do?
I think he would have to be the reason they win games. Not he's
Okay.
just a cog in the machine who... But he doesn't even prove to make mistakes. Like, he had 12 interceptions last year, and he had 14 in 2021. So I think he's someone who's kind of a little bit of a wild card, who throws a lot of passes, makes a decent amount of mistakes, but he was in a system that really showcased that, got him a lot of yards and a lot of good points. And I think at Notre Dame, I think at least his yards and touchdowns are probably going to go down because they're not this big passing attack. I don't remember what the name of the passing attack was they had at Wake Forest the last 2 years. They did have a specific
slow
name
mesh.
for it. There was something about it. They had a specific name for it the last 2 years. But at Notre Dame, I think it's really going to slow down. And he's not... I don't think he'll be thrown to as talented of receivers as they had at Wake Forest, because Notre Dame had someone get hurt. They lost a couple guys, and then their other receiver, Lorenzo Styles, transferred to Ohio State to go be a cornerback. So...
Yeah.
He didn't even... Lorenzo Styles didn't even want to stay and be the top receiver at Notre Dame.
Some would say he'd been passed by.
I think Sam Hartman is a step up from Tyler Buckner? Yes. But I looked at all of these rating the quarterbacks going into the 2024 draft. I looked at 8 websites. 7 of the 8 had Sam Hartman ahead of J.J. McCarthy.
That's bonkers.
And that's why I think Sam Hartman's the most overrated. Like, if you watch them on film, it's clear who's better. I think Sam Hartman had a good system that helped him out. That if J.J. McCarthy played in that system, he's probably passing for 5,000 yards. So
I'm not going to say that much, but I think Sam Hartman.
I'm looking at the attempts in 2021. He's
going to be adequate.
In 2021, Sam Hartman had 508 attempts. What do you think JJ's doing with 508 passing attempts on the season?
Hopefully, at least 4,000 yards.
I think so. Yeah, like, to me, that's what sold it. When I kept seeing Sam Hartman above JJ, I was like, all right, come on. Go look at the film. Don't get caught up at him racking up stats against all the crappy ACC teams. He only really actually had one big game at Wake Forest against a legit team, and it was Clemson this year when they lost in overtime. That was like the one. Like, I looked at a lot of games where they lost to some iffy teams, and Wake Forest only had like 21 or 28 points. It wasn't like they were just losing in these shootouts. He had a couple games with 3 and 4 picks.
Historical context. Would you take Ian Book over Sam Hartman?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think Ian Book I think he was so much more efficient on the ball. Like, I'm looking at Sam Hartman, I don't see efficiency. I see a guy who's got a good arm and got a lot of good capabilities, but like I said, his completion percentage was only above 60 for one of his 5 seasons in college. And then he's got all these interceptions to his name as well.
I have a feeling the efficiency is going to go up while the overall numbers are going to go down. And I think if you have that for Notre Dame, you could have a pretty good year.
I think he could, but just like I said, they're listed him as consistently as the 5th, 6th, and 7th quarterback for the draft. I'm like, that's not the case. Well, am I comfortable putting Sam Hartman in the top 15 quarterbacks in college, yes, maybe even number 10. But all this love for 5 and 6, that's when I was like, no.
See, I hadn't seen him quite that high, which I don't think he is that high. But yeah,
No,
I think he's a top 15. So, and that's huge for Notre Dame because they have not
Which
had
top 15 is
that
still
level
good.
of quarterback.
It's still good. He's
very
not
good.
this top 7 guy.
So I've got 2 for my over. Number 1 is Shedeur Sanders.
Interesting.
I've been seeing him mocked in the first round, which is insanity. I don't know who is getting. I know that probably the Sanders name gets a lot of clicks, but I don't know how you could mock a guy in the first round when he's going to be playing at Colorado. They're not going to be very good, and he's coming up from a level of football that's probably 2 or 3 levels below what he's going to be facing. So I just don't see that jump happening. I'm sure he'll be fine. He'll be probably pretty good, but not so good that he's going to leave for the NFL early and then go in the first round. That's insanity. The other one is Quinn Ewers, who I've been driving the Texas hype bus.
Yeah.
Quinn Ewers is not really the reason why. I've seen him mocked in the first round as well, and he was not great last year. He had moments, but he really needs to make a huge jump if he's going to be a first-round pick next year. Then again, maybe not, because first-round guys like Anthony Richardson go just because of traits. So maybe he'll be a first-rounder, but I just don't think he's going to be a first-round college football production-wise right away. I think he'll be improved, but I think he's a little overrated. I think he's a lot overrated. Some people think he's the best college football quarterback.
Yeah.
I'm like, have you seen Drake May? Have you seen Caleb Williams? They're so much better than Quinn Ewers. J.J. McCarthy, who needs to improve leaps and bounds over last year, was much better than Quinn Ewers last year. And people have already basically anointed him quarterback 3 this year, which is crazy.
I agree. Were you surprised they didn't say Jordan Travis?
I was waiting for it,
Okay.
but he's a tough one. He's efficient, but he's also not.
The one credit
He's not going to be an NFL quarterback.
The one credit I gave for him was, he did lead his team to the record they had to double digits, and like you said, there was an efficiency thing that I looked at that I was like, okay, that was why I leaned Sam Hartman. Like Quinn Ewers was actually my 3rd, and Travis was my 4th. My number 2 was a hot take against myself. My number 2 was Kyle McCord.
For over?
Yeah. He's done nothing, and he's being considered a Heisman frontrunner. Like, don't get me wrong. I hope that he is, but he has legit played a game against Akron, and he is being considered as a Heisman frontrunner. Like, no, like it doesn't work that way. Like, you have to have played in order to be considered a Heisman frontrunner. Now, for Kyle McCord, it might just be like, this is kind of the same thing for Bama. Insert OSU quarterback as Heisman frontrunner. But
yes,
still, I think to get that adoration, I think you have to have played and earned something. I don't think you should be called a Heisman frontrunner if you haven't played.
I understand that, and I generally agree, but to play the other side, the first year that C.J. Stroud took over, before he played his first, he took his first start, I predicted incorrectly, but I did predict that he was going to end up in New York for the Heisman ceremony in his first year. What? Actually, did he not end up in New York? Maybe I was right. For his first year,
he might have. He statistically he had a better season in 2021 and 2022. To be fair,
either
he
way,
was throwing
he was
to Chris
fantastic.
Olave, Garrett Wilson, and Jackson Smith and Jigba.
Well, to be fair, Kyle McCord or Devin Brown will be throwing to Marvin Harrison Jr., Emeka Egbuka, and Julian Fleming.
Yeah, Stroud was there because remember the interaction between him and Aiden.
Okay, so I hadn't seen a snap from Stroud, and as a Michigan fan, I said, yeah, he's going to be at the Heisman ceremony. And apparently he was. I didn't know Stroud was going to be crazy accurate. I didn't know all his features. I just knew he was pretty good. He's throwing to awesome receivers. He's going to be there. So I do understand the sentiment. Insert Ohio State quarterback. Insert Alabama quarterback. I'm hoping that McCord is going to be a whiff, obviously. But I can see, I mean, how good do you have to be to literally just throw the ball to a wide open Marvin Harrison? I think you and I could probably put up some numbers throwing to Ohio State wide receivers. So
I think there's
a good chance he's going to have a good year.
I think by the time we get to Michigan, Devin Brown is playing quarterback.
Why?
I think something that Ryan Day is taking notice of is not that you need a quarterback who you can make design runs, but when we played Georgia, as great as Ibuka and Harrison were doing, CJ Stroud made a lot of plays with his feet that kept us in that game. And when you play these teams with great defenses or big games, you got to have a quarterback that's an athlete. Kyle McCord is not a statue in the pocket, but I've seen videos. Devin Brown is clearly a better athlete, and their arm strength is really about the same. I think really it's going to come down to who is the most accurate. But if they're the same in a lot of places, Devin Brown's got that athleticism in him that goes through. I mean, look at the difference between, don't get me wrong, JJ is clearly a better thrower than Cade, but when you threw in that athleticism element, it made the gap feel even farther between those two guys.
What's a comp for Devin Brown?
That's a good question. Okay. It's going to make it sound like this isn't that good, but I have heard the Sam Ehlinger comp before.
Okay.
At Texas, where honestly he was a pretty good quarterback and didn't really have anything around him while he was at Texas.
Yeah. Okay.
I think that's maybe because, like I said, Ehlinger wasn't a crazy athlete, but he was a good scrambler.
Would Max Duggan maybe be a comp then too?
Max Duggan's probably another good comp. Yeah, Max Duggan is probably a good comp for Devin Brown.
Yeah, I might want to go that direction if I was a Buckeye. Mm-hmm. We saw the way that Duggan was able to literally save TCU's season on multiple occasions. Underrated quarterback. We'll get back on track here. I am kind of breaking the rules again. I'm going literally every Pac-12 quarterback that is not Caleb Williams. I think they're incredibly slept on. I have been seeing people really disrespect Michael Penix, who threw more yards. He threw for more yards than every other quarterback in college football, and he is not getting a lot of respect. I think Bo Nix, who I think just because he's been around for so long, people kind of take him for granted. I think he's a good college quarterback. And now you're going to have other guys like DJU out there, and he might not even start. If Oregon State starts their other quarterbacks, they're probably going to be really good too. You're going to have Dante Moore possibly at UCLA. I think that the conference is just so loaded with quarterbacks, but really only one guy is getting as much shine, when especially those top two guys I mentioned, Penix and Bo Nix. Nice. They need to have more attention because they're fantastic.
So this is the only one where I had actually two listed as a 1A and 1B. My 1A is Brennan Armstrong. He was at Virginia for a while, and now he transferred to NC State. He is taking the place of Devin Leary, who went from there. But Brennan Armstrong had a season where he passed for over 4,500 yards. He's got good capability. He does have a little bit of a turnover problem. I think he's got to fix it. His interceptions were very similar to Sam Hartman. But I watched his film. I think he has a more NFL arm than Sam Hartman does. I was watching some. And Brennan Armstrong is a guy that never gets talked about anywhere. And I think at NC State, I think he's got a chance for a good reset. And we've seen quarterbacks at NC State be successful. Not blow us out of the water. But if you think about over the last 10 to 12 years, there's been a few quarterbacks from NC State that have gotten some NFL starts and gotten drafted decently high in the NFL as well. And Brennan Armstrong could arguably be the best of that group of quarterbacks that's coming up. Most noticeably, Mike Glennon and then Ryan Finley. Guys that, like I said, they're nothing special in the NFL, but they've started and they got drafted, not crazy low. So I think Brennan Armstrong. But the other one I actually had, 1B, was Cade McNamara.
Oh.
Because
okay,
I think now he's going to a place where they possibly run the ball even more than Michigan. But, he was the quarterback of a 12-1 team that beat Ohio State, won the Big Ten, went to a college football playoff, and he had Corum and Edwards, and Hassan Haskins was still there as well. And you still had a couple of athletes that you guys ran a lot of jet sweeps with at the time, where I think Cade was just masked. Like, do I think he is an NFL quarterback? No. But I also don't think he's gotten the chance to fully show what he is capable of as a passing quarterback. And I'm curious if Iowa does that, because they got Eric All, they got Caleb Brown from Ohio State, and they've got another transfer wide receiver coming in, along with one that they kept that's pretty good. So they'll probably have some of the best wide receivers Ariel have since the Ricky Stanzi years back when we were in late high school. They'll probably be the best wideouts and skill positions they have. So I'll be curious to see if they allow Cade to throw the ball, because I think he's got a good arm. I think he's decently accurate. His deep ball isn't the best, but in intermediate throws, he's actually fairly accurate. And like I said, he's got potential. We all know what Michigan State's secondary is, but at the same time, not every single school is lighting them up. He's shredded them like Swiss cheese. I think you still have, even when it's a bad defense, you still have to be a good quarterback to consistently take advantage of them every single play. And so I think he is a guy that, could be Iowa's best QB in a while. I don't think he's going up NFL draft boards. I don't think he's a Heisman contender, but I think he does deserve a little bit of recognition as being an underrated quarterback, because I don't think he's been given the chance to use his full skill set yet.
So I'm very excited to watch what he does this year. I've got all love for Cade. Appreciate what he did at Michigan. I think you're probably right. He's probably underrated. I think there's aspects to his game he hasn't shown yet. He actually came out of high school as a bit of a gunslinger, and then obviously had to rein that in because Michigan hates throwing the ball. I will push back on one area where you wanted to see Sam Hartman be the reason Notre Dame wins games. At Michigan, I cannot point to a single game where I could say Cade McNamara won that game for Michigan. It was entirely the defense. It was entirely the running game being fantastic. And for Iowa, he's going to have that opportunity, so we're going to see. That's why I'm so intrigued. Yeah. But history hasn't shown us that he can do that yet. But obviously he's an upgrade, for sure.
And to the counterpoint, he was efficient. He didn't turn the ball over. He had 3 interceptions that year? 3 or 4?
I think he had 6.
Still. That's
6 or 7.
If you count the bowl game and the Big Ten championship game, that's less than that. That's like half one a game. Like I said, while Sam Hartman out here throwing 13 and 15 interceptions a year.
Different styles of offense, but I'm interested. But like you said, I don't think he's an NFL quarterback. Where if you're a big program like Michigan, you got to be getting NFL quarterbacks, and I don't think Cade Mack was quite that quality. But we'll see what he does for Iowa. We are getting pretty long-winded here. I think that was our last.
I've got one more thing.
One, right?
I've got one more. Head coach.
We'll do it nice and quick. I want to make a idea here. What if we cut SEC preview? We do an entire podcast early next week, on the SEC, and we finish up with the head coaches here. How about you?
I'm good with that, because there's a lot to talk about in the SEC.
Head coach, why don't you tell us who your most overrated head coach is? Let's get someone really upset.
It's a big one. I think this is either one where you're going to be like, I 100% agree, or you 100% disagree. I think there's no in between. I think based on what he's done as a head coach, you're on one side of the aisle. For me, it's Lincoln Riley.
Oh, that's tough. I can see both sides of it.
He only has one.
I disagree.
He only has one big victory since he's been the head coach.
You wouldn't count his Big 12 championships?
No, because they beat garbage when they played there. His win at
I
Ohio,
think-
his win at Ohio State in 2017. That's like the only win that you could like really put your name to. And to be honest, they won that game because of Baker Mayfield. I was at that game in the stadium. That game, Baker was unbelievable. Every single person around was just like in the third quarter, we're like, man, if we don't if we don't score a touchdown here, it's over because Baker's not stopping.
I think you have to give him credit for his quarterback development. I mean, you start with Baker, you go to Kyler. You also had who's the guy
Jalen
for
Hurts.
the Eagles now?
Jalen
Hurts. Now Caleb Williams. I mean, the guy is nothing but consistent as pumping out Heisman level quarterbacks. I think you have to give him credit for that. Where I do see an argument for your side is just the fact that he has never once figured out how to form a championship or at least just good enough defense.
Exactly.
That is absolutely a disservice to the fans and to the teams. And that's where it does hold him back from being an elite coach.
Yeah.
But the fact that he took USC from, what was their last record, like 4-8, to immediately playing for one game to get into the playoff. They did lose the Pac-12 championship. I understand that. That's a black mark. But the jump in quality that he immediately brought is real, and I think you have to give him credit for that.
I think he has built his name on just being able to have the best quarterbacks while he's somewhere. I think if he didn't have Caleb Williams, he goes 7-5 at best his first year. I think he is literally I think he has been very fortunate in recruitment because, like I said, Baker Mayfield didn't start at Oklahoma. Kyler Murray didn't start at Oklahoma. Caleb Williams was the only quarterback that actually started with him, but then Caleb Williams also transferred because Caleb Williams is now at USC. And so I think Lincoln Riley has been able – the one credit I'll give him is basically every year, besides 2019, because Joe Burrow, he has basically recruited the best quarterback around. And I think he is just living and dying off the best quarterback, and that's why he's the best offensive coordinator in the country.
Okay, but if you're going to say that about him, is Ryan Day in that same stratosphere then?
I think Ryan Day is in consideration.
Okay. Well, at least you're consistent.
I do think the difference though was Ryan Day's got. I mean, it was the first year, but I mean, 2019 that defense was mean with Chase Young
with Urban's players.
But I'm very curious. Curious to see what we do this year because Ryan Day, at least though, Ryan Day has failed at it so far, but he at least has addressed it. I have never once heard Lincoln Riley say the word defense. So, like I said, once he finally wins a playoff game, I'll change my mind. But I mean, USC, the conference championship, he lost those the exact same way he loses all his playoff games, and he has shown nothing that he can change. And so, I do not think he should be called a top 5 coach in the country. He has not won a playoff game.
Would you put, if he hasn't won a playoff game being a major contributor, is Jim Harbaugh in that conversation?
That's a good question.
I mean, tripping over yourself to lose to TCU, I think, is one of the most all-time fumbles I've ever seen.
I think if you
had no business losing to.
I mean, I'm still just going to go based on their whole career. I would say Nick Saban is the best coach with Kirby Smart at number 2. I would say Dabo Swinney is number 3. And if you're going based off winning playoff games, Ryan Day has won a playoff game. But I don't even know that I would go with him number 4. I do think Brian Kelly is pretty underrated for what he can do, but I think we need more of a sample size. I don't know. Maybe Harbaugh, Ryan Day, Kelly, Lincoln Riley, they're all in that second tier, not in the elite tier.
Okay.
That's the second tier coaches. They're not the elite tier with Dabo, Kirby, and Saban. That's the elite tier of coaches. Harbaugh, Day, Lincoln, and Kelly kind of make up that next tier of coaches.
Yeah, I can respect that. So my overrated coach, unashamedly, is James Franklin.
See,
He is a fraud.
I honestly figured you were going to say Franklin, so I wanted to find someone else. But yeah, Franklin is the worst, dude. Hate him.
They cannot win a close game to save their lives. Last year against Ohio State, I was amazed at how quickly they unraveled. I mean, they were winning that game for 3.5 quarters, and then they ended up losing by like 20 points. It was unbelievable. And that's just par for the course. James Franklin wilts under pressure. He builds fantastic rosters stacked with NFL talent, and they do nothing. They have never made the playoffs. They won the Big Ten one year where they beat Ohio State by blocking a field goal. They lost by like 40 points to Michigan that same year.
Yeah, I remember that.
They were not the best team in the conference, but they kind of got a little bit lucky and won the conference, and then they lost the Rose Bowl to USC. James Franklin is such a fraud that I cannot believe.
He lost to Clay Helton.
He lost to Clay Helton in the Rose Bowl. I can't believe the amount of respect he gets for doing almost nothing, and especially nothing since 2016 when they had a Big Ten title. And they were probably the third best team in the conference that year.
It's funny, though. They are kind of funny for a program that can go 10-2 in the regular season so many times and just still feel irrelevant. Isn't that kind of funny?
I mean, they went 10-2 last year, and now everyone's picking them to win the Big Ten.
If you look at Vegas, they're picking Ohio State. Vegas is picking Ohio State.
I know that they're not the odds-on favorite, but I'm saying a lot of national media is saying, watch out, this is Penn State's year. They're finally going to do it.
But
I'll believe it when I see it.
Here's why they have to do that, though. That's a story. For so many years during Brady Hoke and when Jim Harbaugh got there, every year was the year Michigan was finally supposed to win the Big Ten and beat Ohio State, right? Well, now that they've done it twice in a row, it's not cool to pick Michigan anymore. It's still not cool to pick Ohio State. So the story now is picking Penn State because they've got this quarterback coming in. They do got some decent defensive pieces, and so it's not attracting any views to say, oh, we're picking Michigan or we're picking Ohio State. Like, you're starting to know what it feels like to have been Ohio State in the last 10 to 15 years, because every year it was always why Ohio State won't win the Big Ten. It's not why they would, it's why they won't. And now you're kind of getting the same thing as Michigan. No one out here in the national media is going to say why Michigan's going to win the Big Ten. The only story is why they wouldn't and why someone like Penn State would, when in reality we know Michigan and Ohio State are going to play for it on November 25th or whatever it is.
Well, I am intrigued with Penn State. I'm not trying to talk down too much because I think they're going to be good, and I think the Penn State-Ohio State game is always one of my favorite games to watch.
It is, but that game is in Columbus this year, and Michigan's got their most experienced team, and the whiteout is at noon. It's not even at night, so I think Penn State got it. I think their schedule is not giving them the draw they want. I think they want it. I think it would be better the other way around. Since you can't get them at night, I would say you'd almost be better served of going the other way around. But, I don't know. But like I said, they don't there's how do you feel? Do you feel like you've escaped it, but yet college football is robbed a little bit, that Michigan, Penn State is not the whiteout this year?
So I mostly just feel relief, because if it was a whiteout, I think I would predict a loss. Even though I think Michigan's the better team, the whiteout atmosphere just changes things. So I mostly feel relief. However, if it was going to be a whiteout, I was going to go to it because it is a bucket list item to see the Penn State whiteout. And because it's at noon, I'm not going. It doesn't have the same appeal. Yeah. So I do feel a little bit sad, but mostly just relief, because this is our year. This is a championship or bust type season for Michigan. So
if you want to be honest, the whiteout doesn't scare me. It doesn't. Ohio State's like 6-1 in the last 7 times they've been the whiteout game. They're like 6-1.
So
the only loss they have is that
from an Ohio State perspective, it doesn't necessarily hold a lot of weight, but those games were usually very close, which I also attribute to James Franklin wilting under pressure. But then I think of Michigan. I don't remember what year it was, but Saquon Barkley was there. It was the whiteout. And Michigan completely collapsed.
I'm going to assume it was 2017, just thinking about recent teams for Michigan.
It was something like that, but a night game where Penn State scored the first touchdown, the place exploded, and then Michigan immediately turned the ball over or went 3-and-out. They scored again a long touchdown with Saquon Barkley, and the game was over in like basically 3 plays.
Yeah, I think it was 2017 because Barkley was part of the same draft class as Baker Mayfield. Because I remember I wanted the Browns to draft Barkley number 1.
It honestly felt watching that game that it was just the poor 11 players on the field versus 100,000 Penn State players and fans. It was like the weight of the world was on their shoulders because it was just such an intense energy. Yeah. And I think that's partly because the team was mentally weak, and now it would be different. Ohio State has gone in there and won, but I do think there's a real energy you have to fight against when you can't barely hear your thoughts because 100,000 people are screaming as loud as they can.
Yeah, but they're struggling in that game, so I think it's losing a little bit. I don't know. I started thinking about that 2018 NFL draft. Remember when the Browns had the 1st and 4th pick, and they picked Baker Mayfield and Denzel Ward? Denzel Ward is a good corner, but he's not a top 10 draft pick.
Right.
You could have taken Barkley number 1 and then drafted Josh Allen.
It's hindsight, though, because Josh Allen I thought was going to be a bust, and he's fantastic. So it's hard.
If they took a quarterback the whole time, I was screaming for Allen.
Well,
I wanted Allen.
That's a good
Who I absolutely did not want was Josh Rosen.
Yeah, that guy did not work out at all. Even worse than Baker.
All right.
How about your underrated head coach?
This was actually the toughest one for me to find. And what I started doing was I tried to avoid coaches who have only had their job for 1 or 2 seasons. I tried to look at some coaches that have a little bit of longevity, whether at one job or overall. And I eventually settled on Mark Stoops at Kentucky.
I'll give you a hot take. Mark Stoops at Kentucky has the best job in college football.
Why is that?
Because he can go 8-5 and get a lifetime contract there.
That's true.
There are 0 expectations that he would actually ever compete to win the SEC.
Exactly. But they've been in the conversation for about 4 or 5 straight years now. And in Kentucky, in the SEC, which it is not a football school at all, he has gone to a bowl game 7 straight years. 7 straight years he's gone to a bowl game. He's won 4 of them. He's got 3 10-win seasons under his belt. He was the one who ended the curse against Florida, which was like, I don't know how many years it was that they had lost. It was like Chicago Cubs territory or something like that for their losing record against Florida. He was the one who ended that. Like I said, I do not think that he is this game-changing NFL coach, but I think he deserves the respect for what he's done at Kentucky. And he's kind of got a little bit of a chance to prove it. He's got a prove-it year. He's now got his best quarterback he will have had since being there in Devin Leary. Great transfer pickup.
That's true.
Definitely think better than Will Levis. I can't. They don't have incredible talent because they don't have Wan'Dale Robinson anymore. But they went and picked up a couple other offensive pieces in the portal, trying to do what they can to put more talent around Devin Leary. And as we'll kind of get to in our SEC preview when we talk about it next week, is I think both Bama and Georgia are vulnerable. I would still call them the favorites, undoubtedly. But one little fact I will talk about right now as kind of a teaser for it is the SEC has got a lot of returning quarterbacks similar to the way the Pac-12 does. And you can either call them returning or experienced quarterbacks that have transferred. And, George, I think the East will be the toughest Georgia has gone through with where their roster is going to be and where the rosters of the other teams are going to be. Because I think just in their division, they'll have 4 tough games. Now, I still think Georgia is the favorite in all of them, but to go through an SEC schedule, it's still not easy. And, Ohio State proved with the good, now, like I said, it was Stroud, it was Harrison, it was Ibuka, but still, Ohio State was shredding them. And if you can have any semblance of an offensive line to just give your quarterback a few seconds, you can find gaps in Georgia's defense, in their pass defense. You can find those gaps. And so, Devin Leary is there at Kentucky. Joe Milton is there in Tennessee, who's got a massive arm. He's got a lot of things. He's got a lot of problems, but he's got a huge arm. And if Josh Heupel can find a way to make him efficient, he could maybe make Georgia pay because Tennessee gets Georgia at home. And then I do think he's a little bit overrated, but don't count out Spencer Rattler at South Carolina either, because I do think Shane Beamer is a good coach. South Carolina's got a good coach. And so
I'm excited to talk about SEC quarterbacks next week.
I think talking about SEC, I'm actually surprised how I think talking about SEC in general is going to be really, really good. I'm really excited to talk about the SEC. So I think there's a lot. Right. I think there's a lot of intriguing teams this year.
Oh yeah, I can't wait for college football. I'll wrap up with my last underrated coach here, Jeff Brom. Now, Cody, you pointed out in the ACC preview that Louisville could be a dark horse, and I think with the addition of Jeff Brom, that was a really good point, that they could be really dangerous. If you go back through his history, they win games they're not supposed to. I remember the game where they killed Ohio State. I remember the game where...
Don't forget it, man.
where 2021, Michigan State was in the driver's seat to possibly go to the conference championship game, and Purdue upset them pretty handily right after Michigan State had beaten Michigan. They beat Tennessee in a bowl game. I mean, this is a program that has no business whatsoever playing in the Big Ten championship, just like they did last year. And Jeff Brom, he did it. Now, I do think he coached a pretty poor game against Michigan in that game, but the fact that they were there in the first place is unbelievable. And so Jeff Brom is a fantastic coach that doesn't get quite enough national praise. And I think maybe he will start to get it if Louisville has the season that I think they could. And like you said, maybe they're going to be contending in the ACC this year.
He got one of his Purdue QBs out there with him too.
Yep. So that's another intriguing thing. What's Jeff Brom going to do at Louisville this year?
Yeah, that's my highlight team to watch in the ACC. I think that's a great shout.
Well, I made us liars because I did introduce that we were going to talk about the SEC, but we are at an hour and a half. We don't want this to be a 2-hour pod, so we will catch you guys next week, and we are going to talk about the SEC, all things like we usually do, with who's the teams to watch, the quarterbacks to watch, Heisman contenders to watch. We'll have a conference superlative. What kind of conference is the SEC this year? And we can't wait to get into it. But for Cody and myself, we thank you for joining us today. And that was the Football Frenemies podcast.